Yik Yak's controversial spam fighting, VCs investing outside of tech, and some big science breakthroughs. All that and more this week on Crunch Week. Hey there, I'm Colleen.
And I'm Sarah Burr.
And I'm Josh Constein.
And Josh, thanks for joining us today because you had sort of a blockbuster article this week that blew up about Yik Yak.
Yeah, so Yik Yak was trying to fight spam on their app. So Yik Yak's an anonymous app where you can basically just post little snippets of text and they show up to people nearby. But Yik Yak thought that there were some people trying to spam their app, and so what they did was they blocked any mention of the names of their competitors, Unseen, Fade, Sneak, and so if you posted the name of those startups to Yik Yak, what would happen is every minute Yik Yak would automatically downvote your post 1 vote, and when you get to -5, your post disappears, it's deleted. And so what happened was people didn't realize that Yik Yak was trying to block these competitors or that this was anti-spam. They just thought that other people were downvoting their posts and that nobody wanted to hear what they were saying. But it didn't matter if you were talking about the startup like, oh, I love this app Fade, or if you're like, I want to get a Fade haircut, or like watching the sunset fade, it would still delete your post. And the thing is, Yik Yak's supposed to be this unfiltered, news list or this, this feed of truth of what's going on around you. And the fact that they were centering like this, I thought was really inappropriate. So I talked to them about it, and they basically were like, yeah, with our spam tool wasn't as good as it should have been, and we're going to improve it. But they didn't really apologize, and they didn't really seem all that remorseful about it. And I know that startups are trying to do their best to keep the lights on, and that sometimes you got to cut corners. But if your goal as an app is to let people express whatever they want to express, and your only solution to something like this is just to block anyone who mentions that word, I think that's ludicrous. And there's so many better ways they could have done it. They could have blocked device IDs of the people who were spamming, or sent the post that they think might be spam into moderation and have community managers look at it. I mean, this company has $70 million in funding. So the fact that they didn't have enough manpower to handle this in an appropriate way, I thought was just ridiculous.
So they were basically saying this was a sin of misunderstanding.
Yeah, they said it was like, oh, our spam filter went over, out of bounds. And I agree, that is what happened, but it should have never been built like that in the first place.
Like they weren't trying to purposely downvote?
I mean, they say that they weren't trying to purposefully downvote their competitors or suppress their competitors. They were just trying to block spam. But it's a very fine line. If somebody's like, oh, Yik Yak's a fun app, but I also like this app Fade. Is that spam if nobody's being paid to do it? I don't necessarily think so. And I think blocking or deleting those posts, especially in a way that misleads your users, is inappropriate.
I think it just shows how complicated it is to do community management. I mean, this kind of stuff happens in a lot of places. I remember when we used to have, was it Livefire comments on TechCrunch? A friend of mine had emailed me and was like, how come you guys are deleting my comment? And I said, what are you talking about? And he told me which comment it was, and I was able to go back into our system and see what he was talking about. And he was actually just sending a link to another article that explained something sort of technical that he was trying to talk about, and Livefire automatically deleted it because he was sending a link to anywhere.
Yeah, spam is tough for startups.
Yeah, it's tough for startups.
Especially because people don't want to open source their spam tools, because if you do, then the spammers immediately learn how to get past them.
Totally.
And so people have to really build their own unless they're using sort of deep learning AI-based anti-spam tools.
But you're saying with 70 million, they should have it better figured out.
Yeah,
well, and the way they were doing it too, they weren't just deleting it, they were sort of systematically downvoting, so it looked like people were just not wanting to see that.
And they said it was that was to give a post a fighting chance to be able to escape being deleted. But the thing is that in 5 minutes, so few people are probably going to see that post, and the percentage of them that might enjoy it and upvote it is too small for it to get a real lifespan. And so I think in the future it's spam and moderation and community management is really tough, but it matters because when you screw up with it, it becomes a big issue. Facebook's had tons of problems with this where, people flag some, women's empowerment page because they're trolls or they're haters, and then Facebook's automatic systems take down that page, and then those people say that, oh, Facebook is trying to censor or suppress or disempower women, and it becomes a big deal. It's you really got to take really good care with this when no matter what startup you are, no matter what field you're in, don't mess around and cut corners when it comes to community management.
And you had an interesting story about Philz getting some venture funding.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't in San Francisco or Los Angeles, which now also has a Philz, Philz is a really popular, coffee cafe that has a few outposts here in the Bay Area.
It's like a caffeine cult.
It is, yeah. It's really something, and it's gotten a lot of traction, especially just in the tech industry, because so many people in San Francisco are in the tech industry. Philz is a place where people have built their startups. Product Hunt. Their first office essentially was a Philz in the downtown San Francisco. So they just got 15 million more in venture capital from a group of investors. The lead investor here was Summit Partners, which isn't a tech-focused firm. It's sort of a general growth firm, but also some tech investors too.
And there's been a bunch of haters who are like, "Oh, how can a tech fund invest in a coffee company?" And it's like, yeah, that might be true, but you know what happened with Starbucks? They went public at around like $300 or $400 million valuation. Now they're worth like 50 billion plus. Like, there's big returns to be made if you're working in a brand in an industry where people are there, where it's very generalizable. Lots of people will consume the product, and it's very viral. People talk about coffee. People post their Instagrams about their coffee.
This isn't the first coffee company to be venture backed.
No, right? Sight Glass, huh?
Sight Glass and Blue Bottle as well. So but it is kind of I can see why people are wondering why a coffee company has been venture backed, because it's a brick and mortar shop.
Agreed.
And it seems a little bit odd.
And there's really no tech here. One thing I appreciated of talking to Jacob Jaber, who's the CEO of Philz, his dad Phil started the company. I mean, he didn't try to spin this in any way like this is a tech company. It's not. But it's clear in talking to them that they've been very influenced by the tech industry. He's really thinking about scaling his company in some really smart ways while also maintaining the culture of the initial cafes. So he's thinking about these business practices, and he's also thinking really about investing in his employees a lot. But for all of that, like, it is definitely not a tech investment, and I don't think that any of these tech VCs would say it's a tech investment either.
But just because it's not a tech investment doesn't mean it's not a smart investment.
Exactly, and that was
Look how fast Starbucks
issue.
came up in the 90s. It was
right.
It seemed like it went from just being like, oh, this thing in Seattle, to being everywhere, and I think those investors think, hey, this could happen again.
And one other thing, I think it also showed, like you said, there was a fair amount of snark, mostly among tech industry reporters, saying like, oh gosh, what's next? Is the next burrito joint down the street going to get an investment? Which,
I would invest
have you
in
heard
burritos.
of Chipotle? Things happen. But also, I think it also showed some of these people's hands in a way, because it showed how little they actually understand business and how little they actually understand the larger landscape. Because although maybe tech venture capitalists haven't been investing in retail and consumer startups that much, there's a huge ecosystem of retail and consumer investment companies. A lot of consumer companies, Larabar, Cliff Bar, a bunch of breweries, these companies get millions of dollars in investment. So it's not totally out of question to think that something like Philz would get funding. So I thought it was a cool story, and I'm excited to see them grow. Yeah. But also, you had some cool stories this week about. I just really liked your headline about Scanadu's pea stick.
Yes, that was. I mean, when else are you going to be able to put pea stick in a headline? All
right, tell us what this is before people freak out.
So the Scanadu, as you may or may not know, is this health tech company that's created. First, it has Scanadu Scout. You put it on your forehead, and it tells you all sorts of things like your temperature, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all sorts of things like that. Their second product is Scanaflow, which is basically a pee stick that you put in, and it wasn't my pee on the video for anyone who was asking. You put in urine, and there's 12 different reagents, and it tells you all sorts of things like if there's blood in your urine, if you have glucose, if you have too much protein, if you have too many leukocytes. So all sorts of markers that can tell you what's going on with your health right at that moment, which normally you have to go into a doctor's office you have to make the appointment. You have to go and wait in the waiting room. You have to go to the doctor. You have to pee in, a little cup.
This thing attaches to a phone?
Yeah, so you put the pee stick in, and you pull up the smartphone app, and you take a picture, and it accurately can tell you what's going on with your pee.
Now, is this something that any of us could buy, or do you have to have a prescription from a doctor to get it?
Yeah, so right now you can't buy it at all.
Right.
They're waiting for FDA approval. So that's the one thing that a lot of these health companies are are running up against is waiting for FDA approval to say it's okay for you in your own home to check on your own health. And Scanadu themselves say that they want to work with the FDA, and the purpose is for you to be able to do these kinds of tests and then send the information to your doctor to get further information.
Okay, and there was another thing sort of like this that you also reported on this week, 23andMe getting a little bit of leeway from the FDA. It sounds like there's some big things happening in this whole space.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's been holding back a lot of health tech companies is FDA approval. So 23andMe just last night got FDA approval for one of their test kits, for their genetic test kits, to be able to test for something called Bloom syndrome. Now, Bloom syndrome is it runs on a gene variant that the parents don't have, but you can pass on to your child, and it's a pretty strong predisposition to getting cancer. So you'd want to know if you're going to be passing this on and that your child is probably going to get cancer, right? You want to know this. So the FDA in 2013 said they stopped any kind of health information being released from 23andMe based on your genetic testing. They said, no, you can't tell the public about their genes. You can only tell them about who they're related to. Right. So this is significant in that it finally, just this one test, just this one time, they're able to sell this kit and you're able to find out more about your genetic health. And that actually, because this has happened, that's probably going to open up a lot of other possibilities for 23andMe and other companies like Ancestry DNA and the Toot Genomics, other companies that handle genetic history and genetic health, to be able to maybe start finding some leeway with the FDA to be able to give people their genetic health information.
Well, I look forward to living forever with all of this fantastic new technology.
That just means that you're going to have to read our blog post forever.
I know, that's true.
Sorry,
good luck, everybody. But thanks for watching this all the time we have, and check in next week.